So, every textbook is like a tool, and it's designed to fulfill a particular need. So what about this one? What need was this book designed to fill? Well, as you know, if you've taught English at a university here, it's quite the challenge. Right? There are many students who are afraid to speak or shy and reticent, especially in groups. We've all had the experience, and you try to talk and you're met with the silence and all that. That's sort of typical here. Many students don't have a high motivation to speak because they don't necessarily want to take this subject. They have to take it, so that's a very typical situation. In education here, it tends to focus more on English as a subject as opposed to as a skill for actual use. So a lot of students learn grammar, vocabulary, writing, reading, translation, but they don't have a lot of experience in actually how to use the language, how to speak. And they're really unaware of differences in culture between sort of an English speaking style and a Japanese one. So they speak English but in a sort of Japanese manner, and it doesn't always, it's not optimal. So they're not aware of cultural differences. And in addition, in many universities, and especially like in first year required classes, they're really big, and you're dealing with really large classes. Like right now I've got one that's 41 students from the engineering faculty, right? I would say, they don't all want to be there, I know that, but they have to, and you have to deal with that situation, right? We meet once a week, 90 minutes, 15 times, that's it. So 22 and a half hours, that's less than a day of their life, right? Altogether, they're not really have a lot of time for improving. So, and then there's mixed levels, that's another common thing you have to deal with. So it's a tough situation. So this book was designed especially to try to deal with that situation. We're trying to crack this problem, right? And so what I'd like to do now is give you an overview of specifically how is this book designed to deal with this very challenging situation. Well, first of all, the book focuses on real-time conversation. So what does that mean? Well, we've got topics of everyday life, the things that students are doing now. Getting to know each other topics. So they're not learning how to give directions or how to order food or how to make reservations, which is all good, but that's a different type of English. That's more of a transactional. We're looking at more interactional English. So that students who are very social and really care and prioritize their social life at university can maybe enjoy it because we're teaching them how to do what they already do. Right? This is about human interaction, right? And so let's go over the table of contents. Do you all have your book? Let's take a look at it. There are 8 units. Each unit has 3 parts, and the basic idea is to teach 1 part per class, per 90-minute class. So 1 part has roughly 60 minutes of material. So you've got time at the beginning for a warm-up or review, maybe time at the end for expansion or something else that you have to do. So you can go through 1 part, so each unit is a different theme, like getting acquainted, daily life, talking about hometown, travel. These are typical conversation topics that people like to chat about. So this is 1 theme, but each part is a sub-theme. All right, so what we're doing is trying to teach how to talk about 90-90 theme, and then we break it down. Each class has a different sub-focus. And then you put it all together, you can have a nice flowing conversation that moves somewhere, that goes somewhere, right? I'll get more into this. Later on, I'll run through a basic lesson with you, and you'll see this more in detail. We've got, so this would be like the first class. This is 3 classes, then a review unit, and like this. So this would be the spring semester, for example. This would be the fall semester. There's some appendices in the back. Okay, so you can pick and choose as you like, but it's also, basically there's a subtle gradient. So these are very simple, how to exchange basic information, where are you from, what time do you get up in the morning, information exchange just to get used to speaking. And by the end, we're leading more towards exchange of ideas and opinions. Right? By the end, they're talking about issues, like what about their future, what are they going to be doing in 5 years, and things like that. So preparing them for discussion. So that's the kind of scope of it. Okay. The next key aspect of the book that we'd like to feature is the foregrounding of pragmatics. Do you all know pragmatics? It's it's a subfield of applied linguistics, and it deals with language in social use, how language is used. Okay? So we've drawn upon this field, and we've come up with 3 basic principles that we incorporate through the book. And then we manage those principles by various conversation strategies. So basically, we're not cracking open a book and teaching Bryce's theory of implication. It's not like that, right? We're just taking something from here, and if you boil this down, like Bartovy-Harlich says, pragmatics is basically the study of how to say what to whom and when. And then L2 pragmatics is how learners come to know how to say what to whom and when. So this incorporates aspects of culture, right, and differences, and learning how to speak. The hidden rules of language. This is pragmatics in a nutshell, right? When you are talking to someone older than you versus talking to someone younger than you, how does the language change? How does the situation influence what you say and what you understand, right? So it's a whole interesting topic that I'm into these days, and we've incorporated it into the book. And why? So what's the point? Well, it's because there's a connection between culture and language. It's all one theme, right? So what I like to do in class, I'll say, okay, everyone, which is better, to bow or shake hands? Doshinomogi desu ka? It's quiet. And I go, you're right, that's it, there's no answer. It depends where you are, right? In Japan, of course, bowing is the way. And if you're in another country, like a Western country, shaking hands is the way. So you have to learn the rules of the culture in order to communicate successfully with it. Right? And if you're more aware about some key differences, you can more successfully communicate. So how is that done? How do you take this intense linguistic thing and put it in a way so that students can actually make use of it and teachers can teach it in a simple way? Well, we have this thing called the 3 golden rules. And if you look here, this is a good introduction to it. Page 9. Okay, so this is a brief introduction, but what I do with the students, I just have them read Dialogue 1 and Dialogue 2, and ask them, which is better, and why? And students read this one, and they read this one, and I say, okay, which one's better? And of course, everyone says Dialogue 2. Right? And I'm like, wow, it's friendly, it's long answers, it's interactive, and they give me these, they notice themselves. And I say, okay, well, this is what you're going to do in this class. This is what the book is all about, is teach, to learn how to talk like this. Notice that the language is not very high level, and you don't need such high level grammar to communicate successfully. Right? So this is with pragmatics, this is without. Right? So this is a very, very clear way. We've got 3 rules. The first one is about silence and the role of silence. And it's called Golden Rule 1, avoid long silences of 3 or more seconds. Okay. And then we've got that sort of exercises to explain it, and then all these principles are then put into every single unit. So they're reviewing them every single unit within the context of that particular discussion. Okay. So before, in the old edition, they were just sort of separated on its own section, in its own island. And one thing that we felt was really important was not to just cover it in one class and then let it go. For students to really, really make this a part of the way they speak, they need to constantly review it. So we've changed it, and we've added these things called sounding natural notes, which deals with the pragmatics in the moment that they need. All right? So here's one that focuses on Golden Rule 1, and it just shows, okay, the question is, what's your major? All right? My major is... Maybe they don't know, so they're going to need to search for vocabulary. This is a situation that often causes silence. They don't know what to say or how to say something. Okay, so we'll just do a strategy. How do you say butsuri in English? Physics, yes, that's right. So dealing with how to avoid breakdowns. That's a key aspect of Golden Rule 1. Okay. Then here's an activity to focus on Golden Rule 2, which is longer turns are better, right? Try to give at least 1 or 2 extra pieces of information in your turns. So how do you do that? Well, every question has an implicit question associated with it. So, do you have a part-time job? Yes, I do. Okay, what's implicit there? Right? For example, well, how often do you work? Do you like your job? Why? If you don't like it, why not? Or where would you like to work? So all students need to do is sort of feel and get a sense of what are the implicit questions, and through practice they get to know it, and then they know to make longer answers, right? And here we have an exercise to help them identify implicit questions and things. So that's part of the training. And the third rule is about varying the way you speak. It's okay to talk about yourself sometimes. A lot of English speakers are more active and proactive about giving their opinions, whereas the Japanese style is more passive and waiting for permission from a question. But you don't always need the question to talk, all right? So here, we're teaching 4-turn sequence. Question, B-san answers, A then reacts and gives their own answer to their own question. And then the B-san then reacts and gives their reaction. So this is a basic 4-turn sequence that's very easy. There's a little writing activity. So they're writing little dialogues based on the models here. And it works. And then throughout the book, like in Unit 3, we're doing a 4-turn sequence. And then in Unit 4, we do 4 turns, but not beginning with a question. Someone makes a statement, okay, now I'm going to react and give my opinion, and then the other person reacts and gives theirs. So the back and forth of conversation. In Unit 6, the challenge is to write a little exchange of 6 turns with no questions, right, based on a model. Right? By the end of the book, the challenge is to write an 8-turn sequence without any questions. So they're going back and forth and reacting. And so that's sort of the building process throughout the book. Okay? So that's the Pragmatics. And of course, we also have 11 conversation strategies, which are in the appendix in the back, which you can check out. And here there are 11 different strategies. This is great for reference when they're doing dialogue writing drills. They can refer to this, and they can pick up expressions. All of these are on vocabulary lists that they can drill, and you can test them on. And so they're learning these expressions and understanding why these things are important, right? So this becomes a very active part of every lesson, these different strategies. So 3 principles, 11 strategies, that's the goal, right? To really master these so that students can use them without thinking. One of the signature aspects of conversations in class is a sort of visual presentation. The first 2 editions have this, and we're continuing this so that the student can see the basic structure. And you're doing that classic substitution. You take a keyword. I live in a place called Meijiro. I live in a city, a town, a village, or here's a preposition of place. Okay, so I live near here, I live nearby, I live not far from the station. So they're learning lots of language within a very simple structure that can then be used to talk about different topics. Okay? And then the next stage, we're focusing on varying the questions. So we look at the open form of the question, where are you from? And then the closed form of the question, are you from Doko, right? And so students are learning both open and closed at the same time. They're given time to personalize the model sentences and then practice in a very simple conversation. I'll show you more about this later. So we've added the Japanese to this 3rd edition because we found through experience and research that when really low-level students can instantly see what they're supposed to do, they relax and they're more you can focus more on actually talking. And this also makes it easier for Japanese teachers to teach with this book as well. So this is why the Japanese was added. So another aspect of the book is that there's a whole wide range of scaffolded speaking tasks. So you're going from like really structured mechanical practice towards free conversation. This is a drill that takes the model sentences and shows it how it flows together in a short exchange. And it's presenting more vocabulary in context of the conversation. So they're doing the conversation and they're picking up new words. So they would, in pairs, read this 6 times in pairs. So they're actually getting the vocabulary as they speak it. And they're getting the right forms of the verb. verbs in the context. So it's a very efficient way to go about things. And students can get ideas for how the sentences work together and how it all works and flows together. Another activity is called personalize it and memorize and perform. This is a classic exercise. Students in pairs take the unit's material and they write a short dialogue, incorporating certain key expressions. All right? This is like a puzzle, so they have to figure it out. And even low-level learners are working together. They're talking in Japanese, but they're doing what Meryl Swain calls it, languaging. Right? They're talking about how to do it, and they're flipping through their book, going to the appendices, really trying to figure out how do these required phrases fit, and how can they do it, right? Then they have to memorize it, then they have to rehearse it by standing up and then doing it perfectly without looking and no mistakes. And then after that, it's the happyo kaijikan, right? They have to perform it. If you have a large class, you can do it in small groups, so each pair does their presentation, the others give feedback, or if you can actually do it all, have pairs come up and present it. This is really effective for holding students accountable for the amount of effort they put out in the class. You can't hide in the class. You're going to be presenting, and so you have to pay attention and work hard in class. So this is very effective. All right, another one, interview and report. This is a classic thing. You interview a partner, take notes. The note-taking slows things down, makes it easy. And then they change partners, and then give a mini report about who their first person said. Classic activity. Right? We've got a little dialogue here to help get them started. So one person is focusing on making a mini presentation, making a turn of multiple lengths. So it's an exercise to help build longer turns. And active listening. So the other partner is reacting. Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Oh, that's cool. Sounds interesting. And so one person's talking along, the other person's reacting. This is a very effective technique. Of course, then at the end, you've got free conversation. This can be done any way you like, right? When you get to this point, all of the unit's questions are here for easy reference. You can do whatever activity you like. I like doing timed conversations, 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, and have them rotate around, switch partners. That works really well in my classes. So however you like. All the great ideas you've learned at JALT through the years you can apply at this stage. And we wanted to make it sort of open so that you can teach the way you like to teach. So the book is hopefully at a point where it's not trying to take over your way. This is one I really like too. One thing that I found through experience is that it's really great to talk about yourself, but after a while you need a break sometime, right? Especially if you're switching partners and repeating the same conversation a lot. So we threw this in this edition. If you look in the back, this is a guided role play. This is, again, a traditional activity, nothing really original here. I had my students make these character cards, so I'm proud of them, right? They did a great job with these. And so all you do is you pick a character, and you are this character. So now have the conversation. Use the questions from Unit 1, right? So you're reviewing Unit 1. Now, what's the next step? Well, let's review travel, Unit 4. Okay, so where have you been? Oh, now they have to think of an answer quickly. So this exercise is designed to speed up quick thinking, improvisation. Sokyo de aru, right? Improvise. Think fast. Be creative. Use your humor. And it's fun. It's a break from always talking about yourself, and students can be jokey and have a good time, and it's really fun. Just create their own character, whatever you like. So there you go. That's basically the overview of the book. So what we're trying to do with this book is meet the challenge, the difficult challenge of teaching conversation at a university in Japan. Now, next stage, I'd like to go through a sort of a walkthrough of a lesson. So for this one, I'd like to look at Unit 2, which is daily life. If you could, in this section, I'd like to just give you sort of an overview of how I go about teaching a part of a unit in a class and give you some general advice. I'll also demonstrate, I'll mention the teacher's book. Right? We've got a teacher's book here, which is free. It's black and white though, so if you're into color and you don't mind using a PDF, and put it on your iPad or your laptop or whatever, you can get the full color version as well. Right? There's a lot of good stuff. We've got sections on how to teach each of the activities. We've also got detailed overview of each unit, sort of the idea behind it. We've got a sort of a generic lesson plan which you can use to alter to your needs. And there's page-by-page notes for every single activity in the book, including like what you can say, things that you can mention to your students, answers to questions, transcripts, the whole thing. Right? So, a traditional teacher's book. Also, there's a website associated with it, and it's called CIC Multimedia.com. And what I'd like to do is show you. So, I use this in my class. You don't have to, but you can, and I do. So, I'd like to show you the way I use it, and also to show you what's available on the site. Okay, so when you go here, there's sort of the blue is the Japanese version, it's the student's version. But if you click up here, you can get to the teacher one, which is red, right? The difference is, they're both basically the same, but the teacher one has sort of a downloads page where you can access the teacher's book, all of the audio tracks, which you can download for free. You can also get worksheets that are tailored to each unit. There's sort of extra advice and activity things, and check it out, right? So what I'll do now, we're going to go through Unit 2. And so here's the student one. So I'm going to go to the teacher one. And so it works like this. And I'm going to go to Unit 2, Part 1. And I'll show you what's there. So each page has all of the vocabulary, which is hosted on Quizlet. Do you guys know Quizlet? Right? So we're taking Quizlet's like the YouTube of online flashcards. You can make cards, lists, put them up there, and then you can take them and embed them on your site and whatever. So we've done that. So students can, if they access the site here, they can actually practice vocabulary. I'll show you more.
I usually get up around 7:30.
Okay, I'll focus more on this later, but it's a really great way to practice vocabulary. We've got access to worksheets here, and then we've got the audio tracks here, and also the sort of transcript of the audio. So let's go through it, right? So the first step is the preview. Each lesson begins with a preview, and this is designed to give you a good start. So right off the bat, what I do is I have the students with a partner just read the preview manga, I call it, right? Just read it. They can see what it means, and they read it out, and then I'll make some comments about it. The language is constantly recycled, so if there's a strategy, like for example, hey Paul, you look tired, that's an opening expression. So that's one of the strategies. So I might link back to review that, okay, let's review the openings and closing strategy, right? So there's always links to this type of language that can be reviewed at any time. 2 o'clock, Paul says, and I had to get up at 6:30. This is a plus alpha, an extra information, so I remind them. And that's golden rule too, right? You know, what's the implicit question here? So it kind of gets them a little bit of review in, and they can see what's going to be done. After that, you've got the model sentences. The model sentences are just very simple visual layouts of the target language, and we'll go through it and play the recording. Let me play this one for you so you see what it's like. What time do you usually get up on weekdays? Okay, then I would stop and then everyone would repeat, and then after that you'll hear the Japanese. What time do you normally get up on weekends? You can see it here. I usually get up around 7:30. You can see an emoji as well. Okay. Now, here's a point.
What time do you usually get up on weekdays?
These model sentences each have 1 or 2 what we call audio grammar notes. So I can't really speak Japanese well to the point where I can explain grammar and things. So what we've included are these little short focuses on a particular point to give students a bit of background on grammar or usage and things like that. And so we have it here, the Japanese transcripts here, and then you can follow along and see it here. So let's listen to this one so you get an idea.
のところを見てみましょう。英語で質問したり答えたりする際に usually や normally, around などの修飾語をつけなくても文法的には間違いではありませんが、 どうにもそっけなく機械的な印象を与えてしまいます。会話の時には正確すぎないくらいがちょうどいいでしょう。例えば、I get up at 7ではなく、I get up around 7というようにしましょう。
Right. So the idea here is the idea of not sounding stiff and robotic. I get up at 7:33, you know, that's weird, right? I get up around 7:30, so just reminding them of that point, right? So there's a lot of these little nuggets of information, right? And of course students have a transcript of this as well on their site, so they can review that as well. You can see that. Okay, so that's the model sentence, then we'll go through the variation vocabulary, right? Just basic repeating like we always do, presentation of new language. Then after that, the next page, barrier questions. This is sort of, you can do this in different ways. I like to do it as a dictation, or if I think the students can handle it, I'll ask them, okay, so the open is what time do you usually get up? What's the closed form? And it starts with do you, and then maybe someone will answer, and if they don't, I can just dictate it and write it down. Okay, do you usually get up early, or do you usually get up at 10? Right? So they're given both forms so that they have a little bit more variety of ways of speaking. Then in the how about you, this is very short, by the way. Then this one is the how about you gives them time to take the model sentence and then personalize it. And think about it and sort of prepare for discussion. So in this case, they just have to fill out the times they do these daily activities. Okay. Then to practice both forms, open and closed, I'll go through this little dialogue with a few students. So, Taro, do you usually get up early? And they'll say yes or no. And they'll say, oh, really? Well, what time do you usually leave home? And you can kind of go through this whole list, practicing open and closed. So it's a very bit of kind of mechanical focused practice on the target language in a personalized way. So that's that. So we'll go through that, and we'll do it again with another model sentence. Same similar thing. And then after that, we'll take a break and look at some pragmatics. So what's the pragmatic thing that we can focus on in this case? Well, one thing is, one strategy that helps people sound more natural are pausing sounds to give yourself time to think. In many of lower level students, they're speaking like eto, nandaro, eto ne, and you hear that all the time. And while it's not a big deal, it makes a big difference if they say or ah or or let me see. So this is a kind of thing that you can focus on, for example. So they listen to the explanation, practice that, and then in the next drill, you can see that the model sentences and this strategy are exemplified here in this dialogue, along with numbers of substitution vocabulary. Right? So they've gone through it. So this is basically study, this is a speaking, this is a little bit of study. This is more like an interactive reading where they're learning of vocabulary. And now they're kind of getting onto, this is the kind of personalized activity that I mentioned before. With the partner, they'll write out sort of their own version of this. Okay. Later on in the book, this is just blank lines, and they're more free. At the beginning, we give them a bit of structure to get them going on it. And they have to use like a reaction expression here, then a closed question, then they give an answer, and then a follow-up, and then a thinking sound. So we give them some prompts at the beginning to help them go through, and then they have to write it. It's a task. They can use the back of the book as reference, etc. Check it, and then you go through it and do the rehearsal and performance. And this is a very effective sequence for getting the basic language. Okay? So that's basically it. Not all together will take about an hour to get through. It depends, of course, on your students and your style and whatever. I generally get through in about an hour, and I have time for review. So in my beginning of every class, I always start off with a vocabulary quiz. I'll do some warming up, review of earlier units, and I'll go into the new parts, and then at the end, if I have time, I'll do some more expansion. So there's room there. It's not going to take you the full 90. So you'll have to prepare some stuff. Okay? All right, so there's different things you can assess. One thing that's really important is to assess their vocabulary, right? So as I mentioned, all of the vocabulary is on the website, and it's all on the Quizlet. And so what I'd like to show you now is how a student would be able to practice and then actually take a test using this system. All right, so to do that, So if you go to the website, it looks like this. It's kind of a mobile version of it. You can see the access the cards here, so they could actually practice right here. Another idea is to actually, which is actually better, because it's limited what you can do when it's embedded on another site. What I get my students to do is click this link here, and it takes them directly to the Quizlet page. And from there, they can actually access a variety of different things. So for example, they could go through the flashcards, these different learning activities. This is a game which they can play, like a Shinkei Suijaku matching game, right? This is a test. This is great. This is what I use to test the students on their vocabulary. So they click this, and then you can see the quiz on that list. So they just do it, and they check their answers here, and they show me their score, and I write it down in my grade book. It takes 10 minutes, right? It's very quick. You can also, this is the students can do themselves, right? So for review, you can print this out. If you have a big class, like for my class of 41 engineering students, I wouldn't do it this way. I would print it out. So you just click print test, and it would print out on a PDF, and then you can do it that way. Another idea is you can alter the way the test is, the types of questions and things like that. So this is a very flexible and useful system. It's all free, and they don't have to make an account. Although if you do, there are other advantages for that, which I could talk about later if you're interested in. Okay? So this is a great way for practicing and testing vocabulary. And if you get them in the habit, okay, next week there's going to be a quiz on section 2, whatever, please practice it. Or next week we'll be doing Unit 3, please review the vocabulary for Unit 3. They're practicing, and if you assess it, they'll take it seriously and they'll actually do it. So this works really well. Now, another way of assessing speaking, well, that's a big subject, right? So there are lots of ways to do it. So in the teacher's book, I've written out sort of a general overview of the topic, and I'm offering a number of different suggestions for how you can go about speaking. So I'm basing this off of Paul Nation's, you know his book, What Every EFL Teacher Should Know? He has a section about speaking, testing speaking, and so he talks about 3 criteria. There's sort of reliability, validity, and practicality, and then you have to sort of balance all 3 of them. And unfortunately, there's not one technique that's perfect in all 3. You can have a really reliable and awesome valid test, but it's too hard to do. It's impractical, right? Or vice versa, right? So it's kind of a tricky balance. So there's not one. It's a holy grail for me. I'm searching for the perfect technique, but I'm offering up a whole bunch of different ideas here. So for example, there are more in the book, but here are some examples. You could have the teacher interviewing a student, asks 3 questions, and then the student asks 1 back. That's a very simple one. Although if you've got 40 students, that's not practical because you don't have time to go through all of it, right? So you'll have to test more than 1 student at a time. If you have a pair, you can have them write the dialogue. For example, we have in the review units, after every 2 units in the book, there's a review section where students can look at the criteria, write a full dialogue based on this criteria, and then they can then memorize that and do it for you for the test, or they could just read it, or you could just, if they're really low level, they can maybe have notes in Japanese. They have to translate it and read the Japanese, look at their Japanese notes and then speak in English. There are all different ways to go about it, right? And then you're sort of checking off and assessing different criteria, the pronunciation, intonation, etc. There's ideas of things that you can look at and marking schemes. Another one is to use smartphones. Students can record a conversation, and then they can transcribe it. So the test is more, not just an evaluation, but it's also a learning activity. They have to listen to themselves, transcribe a few minutes of their conversation, including all mistakes and whatever, and that's part of their grade, is making a good transcript, and then you can do a bit of basic like conversational analysis for them. You've got this test, this transcript of their talk, and they have an artifact of their ability at this point, and then at the end of the year you can compare. And you can look at different things, like a fluency measure would be number of words per minute, or number of churns. So if you do the same conversation at the beginning, the same conversation at the end. Okay, transcribe, how many turns did you speak in the spring? Well, we had 5 turns, all right? Okay, now we've got 28 turns. Oh, my fluency improved. You can collect data. So this is a very nice technique. Although, again, it's if you've got a huge class and you're dealing with, it's a bit impractical in certain situations. So it's not perfect, but if you've got a small group, it would be great. So basically, that's an overview of the book. So if you want to think of the book in a kind of a nutshell, what is it? Well, I like to think of it in terms of like extensive reading. You all know extensive reading, that's a big deal, right? You're reading literature at a level that's equal or just below what you're capable of. And the whole idea is so that you're not burdened by the language and you're focusing on the story. And it's all about the joy of reading, right? So I like to think about this as kind of extensive speaking, where the language is not necessarily all new, but that it's activating what they've already learned over their years, and then teaching them really how to put it into real use, right? So that's kind of, I don't know, is this a thing? Is this a thing in the literature? I don't know if it is or not. It just occurred to me that there's sort of a similarity between what we're trying to do and sort of the extensive reading model of things. If it is a thing,
put your name under the quotation.
If it is a thing, well, it's going to be my new thing. Right? So ultimately, like extensive reading is about the joy of literature and reading. This is all about the joy of speaking and human-to-human interaction. How can we be connecting as real human beings with each other? It's not about playing games or being entertained or doing anything. It's about doing what you already do in your own language, because we're humans and we're social creatures and we want to be connected with other people. Right? And it's just doing it in a different language. But you've already studied so much of it. It's not that hard. If you just put a little more effort into it, you could really do it. Even then, you're not going to reach everybody, but at least you'll have a productive lesson. Right? And in a lot of cases where you're stuck in a really tough situation, if you can have a productive lesson, then you're going to have a good feeling about it. Okay? All right? So anyway, that's it. We've got about 15 minutes, so I'm happy I got through that. I was afraid I would be all like giddy right to the end, so.
You mentioned having notes, Japanese notes for speaking English. Can you tell us about that technique?
Yes.
We've talked about this before.
Yes. So one technique for assessing speaking is to have students write out a long dialogue that uses language that you've taught them and that things that you want to see. So they write out a dialogue and then they practice it. And if they're very low level and they have very low confidence and you want to help build them up, you say, okay, please translate it. Write it out in Japanese. Now, on next week's test, you're going to sit in front of me, and apart from the class, and you're going to do your conversation. But okay, it's okay. You can look at your notes, which are in Japanese. So they get the feeling of support. Like they can actually, if they get stuck, they have a fallback, right? But it's in Japanese, so they have to actually, they're not going to read it. It's going to remind them. So this is one technique that can work with very low level or students with low motivation, is to have them produce a dialogue with required language with good intonation. So what are you testing? You're testing their intonation, their fluency, right? How smoothly can they deliver it? Things like body language, if you want, like smiling or eye contact can also be focused on. And they've got the notes, and that gives them a feeling of comfort. And then they do it, and they successfully complete a test in front of the teacher, and they feel good about it, right? So the idea with testing is that you want them, it should be something that helps them learn and gives them a boost. We're not trying to cut them down. We're trying to use testing as a way to promote them to speak more and give them confidence. So,
by the way, I tried that technique for a presentation class. It needs work for me in my class. It didn't. I said, oh, you can have a half sheet of paper with notes, Japanese notes. I'm going to check them before, Japanese or Chinese.
Okay.
Anyway, they sounded just as stiff. kind of reading voices somehow.
Well,
I got to work on that.
It's not like the technique's gonna, if they didn't prepare, if they didn't practice it in English, it's not gonna help them. It's just meant to be a sort of a fallback.
Kind of a crutch.
A crutch, exactly. And sometimes that's helpful.
How are your students' reactions after using this textbook?
I'm very happy with it because I see students realizing that, oh, I don't need to do so much to have actually a good time to communicate. So the reaction has been really positive. And for students who are really, really like Hantai, you know, they're not allowed to rest and disappear from the class because it's very interactive. They're always standing up and doing things. So even the ones who don't like it and resist are actually being forced to do something. So I like that too. So I find that some students are grudgingly, I don't like it, but that over time, when they see everyone else having a good time, that they sort of get pulled into it, and it's a very productive feeling. So I'm very excited to see smiles and students actively speaking and realizing that they can actually talk and communicate. So, thank you for the question.
Yeah, I've been using this textbook for several years, and one of the criticisms that I've heard from students is in the audio, they use non-native speakers, and I was wondering why you discovered that.
Well, in this, one thing that we've changed for this one is we've added more native speakers, but we haven't done away with the Japanese ones entirely. So what we have here, let's take a look at an example. Let's look at page 18. So for the guided speaking practice activities, they're always a Japanese student speaking with a non-Japanese student. So you're going to have a native speaker talking with a Japanese speaker, right? And I think both are important because a Japanese person is never going to sound exactly like someone born in another country. So they need to hear examples of peers communicating successfully with people from different countries in English. So that's the idea behind this, all right? So we're trying to show both. And in addition, in the listening exercises, which there's one at the end of each unit, there's a listening activity. The listening activities are it's a simple fill in the blank. You listen, fill in the missing word. It's very easy. It's a model of all of the conversation from the unit. So by the time they get here, and just before they do free conversation, they study a model of that unit's conversation. Really nice. And here we have two native speakers talking to each other, always. Now, but these are recorded in 3 different accents. There's American, then there's British English, and then Australian English. There's slight variations, right? Which is something you can pick up on if that's an interest of yours, right? So, for example, in the Unit 1 listening, it says, for example, so where do you live? Well, I'm living at the International Dormitory. So in American English we say dormitory, but in England they say hall of residence, you know? So like there are like these little variations. Well, in England they say this, and then in Australia they say, oh yeah, you know, the pronunciation, and you can kind of get into that if you're interested in that. So the listening is to hear the dialogue 3 times, each one with a different accent, and then there you go. So my long answer, and it's less of that and more native speakers. And when there is Japanese, they're always interacting with the native speaker. Thank you very much, everyone.